Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface8020, back again with another great commentary. Earlier today I thought I wasn't going to be able to do this video tonight because of, sorry about that washing machine in the background. I'm on this fast and, it was really kicking my ass, so I was just thinking like, okay, I'll just do a vid about the fast, and then I'll do this Charlie Kirk thing tomorrow afternoon. And now I'm thinking it's the reverse. It's going to be, I'm going to do the Charlie Kirk thing now, and then I'm going to try to give a fasting update tomorrow afternoon. Okay. So, it does seem like a pretty severe backlash to the Charlie Kirk assassination has begun. I will admit that I didn't really see it coming. I think one of the dangers, like, you go back and look at my prediction track record about anything, and it's pretty terrible. I still think I'm really smart and that I'm worth listening to. But when it comes to predictions, I mean, I get some stuff right. I do get some stuff right, but I get a lot of shit wrong. And I think, there's a lot of things that go into that. But I think one problem is that, like, when you have an extremist worldview like me, you lose touch of how things impact normies, and I'm just going to give you an example, not to like beat this horse to death because I know I've talked about it before, but like when October 7th happened, I predicted that Israel wouldn't retaliate. And the thing is, I still know some people over there from like my, old Kahane days. And, I do read some far-right Israeli stuff, and they all felt the exact same way. They said, like, yeah, there's no way, Israel's not going to retaliate for this. I mean, they'll do some like bombing runs, but they're not going to do anything major. And then here we are, all these years later, and or 2 years later now, right? So that prediction didn't really bear out. But you know what it is because what happened is me and people who think like me just didn't understand how normie Israelis thought. Because, so because I was like, I'm trying to think of how to put this. Like, to me, the line that got crossed on October 7th for most normie Israelis, that line was crossed like in the, in the 90s at least. I mean, probably more like the 60s. So I just assumed, like, I was like, oh, Israelis, they're just cowardly chumps. They'll never fight back because it doesn't affect them. So what I didn't appreciate was that, everybody's got a line. It's just a matter of what does it to you, and I think that's what you're seeing with the Charlie Kirk thing. Like, I didn't really expect there to be much of a reaction because I was thinking like I had already decided that the left was evil and that we're in an existential war to the death with them, like, years ago. Like, that wasn't like to me, like, you don't need this to prove it. I mean, to me, it's been so clear for a while. But whereas for normies, it really is a watershed. And another thing is that I just underestimated how much Charlie connected with normie types. It's easy to forget when you're in politics, like, how most people are normies. Like, the overwhelming majority of people are normies. And, like, when you're in politics, you're usually only engaging with people who aren't normies, who are other politically engaged people, who are, by definition, weird, because most people aren't, politically engaged. And so, like, but the thing is, like, I think that Charlie really connected with normies because he was at heart a normie himself. You know, like, I didn't say this as a criticism, but I had nothing against Charlie Kirk. I thought he was a good guy. But I never, like, watched his stuff or found him interesting because everything was just so normie. He didn't seem to have any original views. Now, to his credit, he seemed to be willing to change his views. He believed in, like, dialogue, which is something I'm against. I think dialogue is part of the problem. But that's where most people are. Most people are like Charlie Kirk, you know, and so somebody like Charlie Kirk can identify, like, is going to be able to build a connection, or normie people can build, can connect to a Charlie Kirk in a way that they can never connect to a Donald Trump. You know, Charlie Kirk is just like, you know, like this, like, his worldview and demeanor and approach, that's the same worldview of your dad and your uncle and your brothers, and like the guy you know at the office, and, you know, the guy who works on your car. That's Charlie Kirk. And you know, I mean, like, obviously it's not just an event that occurs in a vacuum. We're talking about really since Obama, even though I don't blame him for it, like almost 20 years now of the left going increasingly crazy and becoming increasingly, coercive, violent, and just basically, you know, I mean, these, like, since Obama came in, it's felt like, you know, like almost like a cultural revolution. I mean, in Europe and in Australia, it's probably even worse, but, you know, there's no Obama signifier there. My guess is it's been going on even longer there. But in America, you see that. But you mean, and I think that's why you see also, like, even a worldwide reaction to Charlie Kirk's death. And I'm not saying that, like, I'm sure that in most of the world, people don't really care. But the fact that you're seeing, like, people in the other places of the world talk about it at all, like to a noteworthy extent. Like, there was, like, in South Korea, there was, like, some cheers for him. And obviously in the UK, we saw today, there's a lot of that. Because, you know, I mean, like, yeah, just because of, like, everything I said. And I really didn't expect that. You know, I think that's, going back to what I said earlier, when you're extreme, you forget how normies think. Maybe I never understood how normies thought, you know. Maybe we can talk about that later in the same video. Unfortunately, I would rather not talk about this. I know you guys don't want to hear about it, but it's such a big part of the reaction to Charlie Kirk's death that I have to discuss it. That is the split on the right. Okay, the split, I mean, obviously, you know, the left reacts, and we're going to get to that, how the left reacts, but the split on the right in the reaction to Charlie Kirk's death. So we're seeing two reactions. And I wasn't really part of either. You see my other videos, I took what I thought a pretty relatively mellow thing, and I'm not trying to say that I'm some kind of voice of reason or anything. It's just that I was radicalized a long time ago. And so maybe this doesn't affect me, like, as much as it does some other people. But on the right, you know, there's two major reactions. One side screaming that we've got to get back at the left. The left has to pay for this. And the other side screaming, Israel did it. And I'm not trying to imply that the numbers are equal, okay? And there is some cross-pollination of those two groups, you know. You can like say that those are, for the most part, separate things, because ultimately, and we'll talk about this in a second, it's not about Israel or how you feel about Israel per se. It's about your focus. You know, about what the focus is. And, you know, two people could have the exact same beliefs, but have completely different, like, issues that they're focusing on. Even if they felt the same about the issues, they maybe disagree about the importance of a given issue. And that's why I think it's so important to discuss the worldview of the anti-Semitic right and how it's different than the conventional right. I'm not saying any of this to gatekeep. I'm not saying that the anti-Semitic right isn't actually right-wing at all and that they need to be unpersoned. I'm just trying to explain where they're coming from. Now, generally when you're talking about the right, I'm about to say this, to me, the most important issue, the reason that I'm like really in politics at all anyway, is being anti-immigration. And then other than that, it's just being anti-liberal. Like, okay, look, I'm going to be honest with you. Let's say immigration didn't exist. There were no immigrants. I probably wouldn't be that interested in politics because there's not a huge difference. Because if you're not talking about immigration, my real interest is in economics, and both parties are equally terrible on economics. So, but another thing is like things like abortion. I'm with the left on. I think that whether like people say it explicitly or not, because again, most people are normies, they don't think of it. The core issue, the issue that drives everything else is immigration. Like if somebody's immigration, like on the right, they're going to be pro-immigration, they're going to be drummed out. There's no like we don't like pro-immigration stuff. So it's even for the people who it isn't their focus, it's an extremely important issue. And it's kind of it's an issue that the right is not willing to compromise on anymore. Thank God. So like that's the main, but there's also other things like just being anti-liberal. Some are really still into the like pro-life stuff, shit like that. Some people buy into the whole anti-Islam stuff. But mainly, it's anti-immigration and anti-liberal, and those are things have become so conflated that they're hard to say like where one stops, because it's like I could theoretically vote for a liberal who is anti-immigration. It's just like, can you imagine such a thing happening? But I would be anti-liberal even if there was no immigration, because again, things like COVID, the bureaucracy, the courts, stuff like that. So, but I mean, again, that's just me. But the thing is, that is just me. The normies, and I know that's not really what we're talking about here, but it is sort of actually what we're talking about. So I'm sorry I'm such a scatterbrained, I'm being so scatterbrained. The normies don't care about that shit. They don't care about like what the courts do. They don't care about the bureaucracy and stuff like that. They're very live and let live in that stuff, because they don't get it. Like Trotsky said, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. Well, that's how it is like with the courts and stuff like that. But they do get the whole immigration thing. So that's that's the driving focus of, I'm just going to call them the conventional right. And but the anti-Semitic right, the biggest issue for them is helping the Palestinians. And to a lesser extent, just kind of generalized anti-Semitism. And this, because I noticed this like a while ago, like way back before Trump's first term. You can go and ask, because don't get me wrong, like these people on the anti-Semitic right are anti-immigration. But if you ask them who's worse, an anti-immigration Jew like Stephen Miller or a pro-immigration Jew like Chuck Schumer, they'll say, oh, Stephen Miller is way worse. And it's may seem counterintuitive if you don't really understand where they're coming from. But actually it makes total sense, in the context of their ideology, that a guy like, they don't like either of them, but a guy like Stephen Miller would be a particularly toxic, malignant threat, but it would be a particularly a bad threat. But they're generally, though, their focus is on helping the Palestinians. And the now the problem there, I mean, there's a few like issues that come up with that. You know, when you make your focus helping the Palestinians. I mean, at least I want to focus specifically on Western countries. Okay, when you make when you make helping the Palestinians your focus, it's really one of the problems with that is that, okay, far right, okay, which means that you're mainly going to be campaigning for the vote for white voters, okay. There's people from all backgrounds who will vote for far right candidates, but generally the backbone of the far right, of any right wing politics in Western countries at least, is going to be white voters. The problem then is that most white people just don't care that much about the Palestinians. They've got, because you see the stuff like, they may be more sympathetic to them, especially the younger generations, but they really don't care about them. So, what the thing is, you get into this situation where I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Adolf Hitler could never be elected today, okay? Because in Adolf Hitler today, like in Germany or wherever, let's just say the demographics of Germany were the same as they were when Hitler came in power. Okay, a Hitler today could never get anywhere because he wouldn't be talking about the Treaty of Versailles or, even the anti-Semitic stuff, like getting the Jews out of the media or out of Germany. Today's Hitler would spend all his time talking about the Palestinians. And, now Hitler himself barely mentioned them. It wasn't something that he campaigned on because he knew that the German voters didn't give a shit about it. It didn't matter how anti-Semitic they were. You're not going to win any votes talking about it. And the, that is a thing that these, the people on like today's anti-Semitic right, either they don't get it or they don't care. And I can't really tell with them. Because I've been reading them and interacting with them for a long time, and I'm not sure. I think they don't get it. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later, but I don't know. The thing is, there's nothing new about this. Okay? Like when I say the anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant right maybe it's new in America. But Europe, they've tried it in Europe. And it doesn't work. The Front National tried it, and Jobbik tried it in Hungary, and Golden Dawn tried it in Greece. And yeah, they would get have some brief kind of success, but at the end of the day, they could never sustain it, or they could never come anywhere close to winning a majority because the electorate just didn't identify with their focus on the Palestinians. I'm not even saying that the electorate disagreed with it. What they disagreed was the priority. Generally, you have to put yourself in the mind of, most people aren't online. They aren't political. They're normies. Well, what do normies care about? They care about what affects them, their communities, their families. Doesn't mean they don't have morals and values, but those aren't usually going to be the decisive things that they vote on. They're not nearly as decisive as their economic situation, stuff like that. So when you have a normie who's maybe right wing and is going to be sympathetic to that message, and their main concerns are the immigrants that we're busing in, and a party comes to be well, yeah, the immigrants are bad, but what we need to focus on is helping the Palestinians. There's just not much of a market for that. But this creates a huge problem. Because remember how I said most of them don't get it? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if most of them don't get it or not. A lot of them don't get it, but some of them do get it. And what happens when you get it? Like, if that's your worldview, like, let's say you think that the most important thing is helping the Palestinians. And your worldview, you come to realize that, oh, wait a minute, this issue, which is more important than anything in the world, the people I'm campaigning to, my fellow whites, don't care about it. Not only do they not care about it, they're apathetic to the enablement, to the way that our countries, this is particularly true in America, but to a lesser extent West Europe, that our countries are enabling Jews to harm Palestinians on a very large scale. So all of a sudden, these people, they start to think to themselves like, well, wait a minute, maybe white people are the problem. You know, maybe like, maybe and then especially when they start to think about it, they'd be like, they'll start to like, that'll open their minds. They'll start thinking, thinking like, well, you know what? If there were no white people, then Israel would never have existed in the first place. You know, so like, and look at what's happened to the Palestinians, which would never have happened without white support. Maybe that white people aren't just brainwashed or ignorant. Maybe they really don't care. Maybe they really don't care about what's happened to the Palestinians. In which case, maybe they're the problem. They deserve to go. So you end up with these, they think of themselves or campaign as white nationalists, but they become de facto. They start to de facto actually hate most white people. None of this is a criticism, okay? I actually am. I'm just trying to explain where they're coming from, and because I do understand it. I've been at the. I'm gonna be straight with you. It's how, like, for a long time, how I felt about most Israeli Jews. Like, it got to the thing where it's like, because I saw the same thing in 2006. Right-wing Israeli Jews would say, oh, okay, no, it's the people are okay. It's just that the left has brainwashed them to do these bad things. To do like I'm talking about expelling the Gaza, the Jewish settlements in Gaza. That was like, they're the like, it's just the left brainwashing them, brainwashing them or tricking them and stuff. But it's not them. And then, it's like, no, it is them. It is them. And then, so, I grew to really hate most Israeli Jews. Hate's a strong word, but that's how I felt. So I totally understand how these, we'll just call them Groyper types for shorthand, could come to feel that way about white people. And like why these ultra-nationalists in Europe start to actually hate the people of their nation, because they realize that this thing that they view as like the greatest evil in the world, they're, some of them are outright supporting it, but they all seem to be okay with enabling it. And then another danger of extremist politics, especially as you go further and further down the rabbit hole, I'm just telling you, speaking from firsthand from this experience, is you start to, and any of you who've like experienced being in extreme politics will be able to relate with this. You start to get to a point where you start viewing everybody who's not as extreme as you as an enemy. And, the people who you're against becomes wider. Like, first it's this group, then it's this group who supports that group, then it's this group who doesn't hate that group enough. And, you get more and more extreme. So that's what happens. And then on the, like, so just on that front, these people, the anti-Semitic right tend to be very supportive of the global South. It's like, so if white people are at least indirectly responsible for expelling the Palestinians from their lands, and meanwhile, the only, like, if, you know, yeah, there are white people taking up for the Palestinians, but if you're talking about as a community, on a community level, the only people in the, like, who are standing up for the Palestinians at all are Muslims. So all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute, is Islamic immigration really a bad thing? Because these are the only people who are fighting, you know, this thing, which is the most important war. And yeah, that's where it goes. But the importance of all of this, though, is like what it means, like the political importance is that this divide is not going away. Okay, you can't just say like, oh, okay, well, you know, Fuentes and Tucker and Candace and maybe even Megyn Kelly, that we're just going to they can go and they can say their thing and do their own thing, but you know, we don't have to worry about it. We can just focus on, you know, immigration or the left or whatever. No, you can't, because the thing is, like, the amount of people who are actually like, who are like, you know, they're right wing, but they're actually going to vote for the Democrats over the Palestine stuff. These are people who are either going to not vote or vote for the Democrats over the Palestine stuff. That their number is marginal. Okay. The problem is that a lot of people who are loyal voters for these right-wing causes, you know, Trump in America, but anti-immigrant people like all over the world, are still very influenced by them. They may not agree with Fuentes's or Tucker's prioritization. They may not agree with their proposed solution, which is to vote for Democrats. But they still listen to these guys. These guys still have influence. So these guys, like, you know, like, in terms of like, Fuentes and Tucker, despite what their fans think, will never have enough influence to start their own political movement. That's just there just aren't enough people who are as hardcore about it as they are. But they, what they do have though is a lot of influence over people who really are part of the wider anti-immigrant movement in Western countries. For now, we're focused on America. I mean, there are millions, probably tens of millions of Trump voters who are very sympathetic to Tucker and Nick's worldviews. So because that so you're seeing now, like, Israel's behavior is now impacting the electoral. Okay, maybe that's a little melodramatic, but it could potentially impact the health of these anti-immigrant movements in Western countries. Again, we'll focus on America since that's it. But in America, it's damaging the or potentially damaging the Trumpist movement here. And that's, you know, what I mean, from an American perspective, why it's so important that the IDF ends this war. The war in Gaza needs to end. And the United States needs to stop providing weapons to Israel. This is not a moral thing. This is about protecting the cohesiveness of the American right. Guys like Tucker and Nick are always going to be, again, they're never going to be satisfied with that. Their goal is always going to be to, like, lead some kind of military intervention against Israel. It's never going to happen. It's ridiculous. They're both completely out of touch with reality. So, you know, it's not even worth discussing. I'm not trying to pacify those guys. Okay? They're not going to be satisfied with anything. What I'm saying is, you don't give them stuff to talk about, because it could be politically disadvantageous to the right. Because the thing is, like I said, I don't want to be talking about this. You know, I want to be talking about the anti-immigrant stuff. But it's not up to me anymore. Well, it was never up to me. There's no, like, a choice to just ignore the issue anymore. You have to deal with it. So the only thing that's going to preserve peace on the right is going to be again, IDF's got to get their head out of their ass, because it's the IDF who's stalling this. This war should have been over like months ago. But, the fucking IDF is just, doing everything they can to prevent the reoccupation of Gaza. And I don't know, like, I wish I could talk to Netanyahu and explain. I mean, he's such a coward, it wouldn't make a difference. But I would be like, look, this is damaging. This is you say you want Trump, you like these anti-immigrant parties. They're not going to be there for you. They're not going to be able to be there for you if you keep this shit up. Because it's splitting Trump's base. You've got to end this war. You got to fire the faggots who are currently running the IDF, and you put in somebody who's willing to end the war, to conquer Gaza and end the war. And now the thing is, like, even I can tell you that in Israel itself, like, even the IDF knows that a Western arms embargo is only a matter of time. Like, it's like openly discussed. They've already like just said, like, yeah, the American weapons are going to get cut off, and they've made peace with that. But what would be really helpful is if they would just stop buying them at all. If they would just, and then just say, like, hey, America, thank you for your help, but go, you guys do your own thing, focus on your internal problems. And that would really take the wind out of the sails of the Fuenteses and Tuckers. So anyway, but now we get to the thing is the leftist reaction. Again, I'm going to stand by my position that I do not think most white liberals or just white people on the left are happy about what happened. I think that there may be a lot who didn't care. I think most feel sorry for Charlie and his family on a human level. I don't know what the statistics are. And then, I want to, talk about a personal anecdote again. During the referendum for the UK to leave the European Union, there was this guy who killed a woman who was, a Labour politician who was campaigning to keep the UK in the EU. And I remember getting in an argument with my brother about it, and I was saying that, like, I don't agree with his actions, but she did deserve it, because what she was doing was bringing in, she supported mass immigration, which is an invasion, it's treason, and you can't have people doing it. And even at the time, I didn't feel right saying it. It's basically, it got to, it was a thing that, it was a battle between my mind and my heart. My mind said she deserved it. These people that immigration is such a bad thing, and the EU is such a bad thing, that people who advocate for it deserve to die. That was where my mind was. My heart was never there. And, it's like what I've said in like earlier videos recently about it. The truth is, I just don't know what the answer is. Like, with violence. I absolutely think that there's times where violence, including lethal violence, is not just acceptable, but mandatory. But I have no idea where it is. And I would also say that you should never feel good about employing it. I just want to give you an example. Like Churchill was a diehard believer in strategic bombing in World War II. And when he saw the results of it, like, he was horrified. So which is the appropriate reaction, right? So, that's where I think, I'm going to be honest, it hasn't always been where I was, but even like in my younger, more radical days, when I would celebrate, the deaths of, people who had done something to piss me off, they their views or whatever had pissed me off. Like, again, it always made me feel bad internally. You know, I was so like self-righteous and justified about it that I was like, they deserved it. But I could feel inside like the corrosive effect it was having on me to feel that way. But, you know, if you're like, but it goes back to like what I was saying before. Like, if you really did think Charlie was a fascist, you know, who was dangerous and was leading to genocide and stuff, yeah, of course you're going to think he had it coming. Even if it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't feel for him and his family on a human level, or that you feel good about it. I think the issue is that we've got a lot of people who do seem to feel really good about it. And I don't think that's the normal reaction. I think a lot of them are reacting that way. I think that the left has kind of always been like that. Going back to what I said earlier, I think in my last video, what Charles Krauthammer said, the right thinks the left is stupid, the left thinks the right is evil. And they've always been like this. And I remember, because my dad was, I told you guys about this, if you've watched previous, my dad was initially very liberal, like a strongly liberal guy, voted for Michael Dukakis, voted for Bill Clinton. But when he turned on Bill Clinton and the left, I remember in the 90s him talking about this. What drove him crazy was that the way the left would talk about the right as being motivated by malice and evil. Like, no, not just that these are people who we disagree with and they have bad ideas, but that these people are malevolent, they're evil. And that drove him crazy, you know, like, and I remember like there was one time where one Democrat said like, okay, before anything else, I think it's important to acknowledge that people on both sides of this issue are coming to it with goodwill and, you know, to respect them. And then my dad, who was very anti-Democrat, really respected that a lot. And me, you know, like the guys from Coldplay who, you know, did a tribute to Charlie Kirk, I really respect that a lot too. Because I mean, obviously they're left-wing guys, and you know, it would be, I don't necessarily know that I would do the same thing, you know, if the situation were reversed. Like, yeah, if it was like Obama, yes. But what if it was somebody like Pelosi? If somebody assassinated Pelosi, I would not be happy about it. I would feel sorrow on a human level. She's still a human being. But I'm not going to, like, her views are still awful. And I'm going to say I would see her death, even if the killing her would have been wrong, I would have seen it as, well, she created, just like the Britain thing, where the EU thing. Well, she created this situation where where psychos could flourish because they were so alienated, you know, and so like when guys like Coldplay who feel that same way that I would have felt about somebody like Pelosi, they feel that way about Charlie Kirk, they go out and do a tribute to them. I think that shows a real strength of character. So again, like when you have people talking about revenge, well, revenge against who? Because again, you can talk as much as you want about the leftists celebrating. That just doesn't seem to be most leftists. We don't have the statistics, but I really don't think it is. I think you have some leftists being kind of mealy-mouthed about it, saying that like, well, what happened to Charlie was bad, but we still are against his views. But like, well, I mean, that's the most that they could realistically do. You know, I mean, so, I mean, I feel like most of the left has handled this well. Now, of course, I do read the people who are celebrating it. I'm glad that we've gotten at least almost 900 people fired, and with more to come. I'm glad that the right is learning to fight. But like, if that's like revenge that way can work, you know, go after directly the people who are celebrating. Do everything, you know, you can to purge it, to put cancel culture back on them. As I've said before, cancel culture has always existed. The only difference is about where the line gets drawn. And, you know, now it's time to give the left some of their own medicine on that front. And, So yeah, I'm all for, if that's what you mean by revenge, yeah, absolutely. Do do all that. But if you mean going out and like killing people, who are you going to kill? Who who is it that you want to kill? And because then if you want to go and just kill white liberals, well, you're doing it for nothing because most of them don't agree with what happened to Charlie Kirk. So it doesn't work. Like the I just want to say, so like a shout out then on the getting liberals fired. She's a complete psycho. I don't want her anywhere near the Trump administration. But Laura Loomer's done some really good work on this front. And back to Stephen Miller, he's because like the voice, he's out there saying that like, oh, we're really gonna go out and like defund the leftist NGOs. And it's all part of, he's maybe the front man, but it's part of this larger idea of, we have to get away from, because you'll see that, right? Like all these like leftists, talking about who are gloating and are happy about what happened to Charlie Kirk and support it. People on the right, their reaction is like, well, because this is what happens when you indoctrinate people into this kind of craziness. So that's what we need to defund and shut down. And then I'm going to say this like, because this is so important to understand. You don't know the left. You all these years and you still don't understand how they think. The leftists who are celebrating Charlie Kirk's death are not doing it because they've been indoctrinated. They're doing it because they're leftist. And that's how leftists think. They think differently than non-leftists. This is literally true. They have a different thought process. They don't need to be taught to do that. That's to be taught to be like that. That's just how they are. And again, it goes with that thing. There's nothing you can do about that. And that's life. We live in an imperfect world, and shit like this happens. And so yeah, cancel as many of them as you can. If this is an opportunity to defund, any leftist programs, great. But ultimately, what's probably going to be the biggest impact, the impact that I underestimated, was, like I said earlier, the watershed thing of it. I mean, there had been growing frustration with the left well before this. But this event really does seem to be a breaking point for a lot of normies who have just come to, they understand the left in a way maybe they didn't before. And because I remember back way before Trump that I would go to more like normie people and show them like, well, look what La Raza, that's like this Hispanic nationalist group, look what they say, stuff like this. And then I would show them more extreme white liberals who talk about like abolishing white people and stuff. I would show that to like more normie white people. And they would just be like, I would expect them to get as mad about it as I did. And they would just be like, whatever, man, I don't care. So, just like a lot of people don't understand how the left thinks, I guess I've never really appreciated how normies think. But what I haven't appreciated also is that even normies have a breaking point. And it may be the case that Charlie Kirk is the breaking point for a lot of normies. It seems like it's going that way. We'll have to wait and see. That's all for now. See you in the next.